Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do?
The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the executive session, where we have totally unfiltered conversation. Nothing is off limits. No one is worried about getting their feelings hurt. We're having honest dialogue around a multitude of topics. I am joined by this esteemed panel made up of Dr. Sean Foster, Dr. Baron Davis, Dr. Aaron Bishop, and Dr. Gregory McCoy. Today, we're going to deviate just a bit from our previous episodes and talk a little bit about the subject, fatherhood, particularly fatherhood in the Black community. And really, I was a part of a conversation recently, and someone made the conversation, Black fathers got to do a better job stepping up and leading families. And I took somewhat of an exception to that because there is often a characterization that Black fathers are not stepping up and are not doing their jobs. And while we can acknowledge that undoubtedly there are some who are not, but we absolutely must acknowledge the many brothers across the country who have historically and continue to do a wonderful job leading their families. And so we're going to have some conversation around this whole topic of fatherhood in the Black community. And all of you gentlemen most certainly have experience in that area since you are all fathers to your own biological children. And I suspect that you also serve as father figures for even the children that you have not fathered. And so we're going to get right on into this topic. I'm going to start with my good buddy, Dr. Baron Davis. Dr. Baron Davis, I know you have heard that characterization on many occasions of absentee fathers in the Black community. Kind of tell me what your thoughts are when you hear that continuous drumbeat that African-American males are not stepping up being adequate and effective fathers.
Yeah, I think it's just what I've come to understand now and know better is that it's just a narrative that was created to suggest that Black fathers are disengaged or not a part of their children's lives. I believe there was a study that came out just a few years ago that actually demonstrated that of all ethnic groups, Black men had the highest level of engagement with their children, whether they live in the home with them or not. So with this perception that based off the number of percentages of households where Black children are being raised, if the father is not involved in the household, then that father is some sort of way not a part of that child's life, and that's a misperception. That actually data actually shows that whether the father is in the home or not, Black fathers are some of the most engaged with their children. They do chores with them, homework with them. They take time out to be with them. And so of all the ethnic groups, Black men demonstrate that they are some of the most engaged fathers. So that's something I think we have to really tout and push out to go against that false narrative that have been created over all these years. And I think, coming from the number of African American men or Black men who've been incarcerated at higher rates and things like that, we have to push that narrative out about our participation in our children's lives.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Davis. Dr. Bishop, I'll bring you in on this conversation here. And particularly as someone who pastors a church, we often hear that not only are Black men absent in our families, we hear that they're absent in our faith organizations as well. And there's this narrative that other than the pastor, if you took these Black women away, the whole church would fall down. Because we just don't have enough Black men to lead even in those regards. So tell me from a pastor's perspective, what has been your experience and your perspective of the prevalence of Black men leading our faith-based organization?
Well, the term fatherhood, father, is very germane to one of the greatest prayers that we've ever recited. And it says, "Our Father, which art in heaven." When the question is our fathers in the homes. And I remember doing a read on a study, the importance of children's church. And it said that if a child joins a church, then 8% of the family joins that church or gets saved. And then it said if a mother or a wife joins the church, then 50% of that household is saved. But if the father or the man of the house joins that church, 90% of the family gets saved. The dynamic of fatherhood is so critical to the structure and stability of our community, because we understand that, I believe they told us in a quote once or twice, that if the concrete of the house is broken, you throw the whole house away. And we have concrete examples of brothers who are broken by the narrative and the dynamic that is being displayed in our community concerning fatherhood. Our men that I know, especially like one of my good friends named Herc, who's here in Columbia, he is trying to combat that narrative on every corner by doing something called Kicking It with Dads. Every fatherhood weekend, or Father's Day weekend, he does this bang up job of bringing out the community to celebrate fathers. Because, about 10 years ago, there was this narrative that was going around where mothers were getting Father's Day cards.
Yeah.
Mothers were getting Father's Day cards because there was some absence of the father figure or the father in the home. In the church, man, we have to heal our men. We have to protect the brothers and let them know that today matters in the lives of their children, and yesterday and tomorrow can be the same advantage. So when we look at in the church perspective, yeah, the Bible says, and a child shall lead them, but it also says, as far as me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Dr. Bishop, I appreciate that. And I'm gonna wade into some controversial waters here for a second.
Yes, sir.
Very often, I think we put a greater level of responsibility on men in this whole equation of parenting than we do on women. And I'm gonna tell you what I'm getting at here. I often hear this whole narrative that we have these deadbeat dads, or we have these absent fathers, and in many instances, I hear that coming from women who have, maybe rightfully so, said that men have not been active parents. But I must ask this question to my ladies, who I have the utmost respect for. When you made a decision that you were going to have a child with a particular man, was there a commitment from that individual to not only be a partner with you long term, but to be a father for that child long term. And in all honesty, folks, that's a conversation that needs to be had. I have 3 daughters, and they know my expectation is I don't want you to have any children until you have a husband who you know is going to be there to help raise those children. Okay. And I know I might be looking at it through some rose-colored lenses, but I think if
Old school
have
lenses. Old
children
school lenses.
and we do not have intact families, then I think we set the stage right from the beginning for things to be out of order. Okay. And I think it's a little unfair that we put all the responsibility on the men in that out of order scenario. And we got to have some honest conversation with our women about having some responsibility in that out of order scenario. Dr. McCord, am I out of line for saying that?
I think you are. And that's just my opinion. And I say that because, you know, I look at it. Let me go back to something Barron said. He said there's a false narrative. I'm not going to argue that point one way or the other, but I do know, as a former educator, as a man who grew up without a father, I know many in my circle grew up without a father. As a matter of fact, I venture to say that 3 or 5 of us on this podcast grew up without father. So I can't say that I agree that that's a false narrative, but it is something interesting to hear. But to your point, JR, I don't think this new generation coming up is looking at parenting the same way as previous generations have looked at parenting. I mean, it's good to have an expectation that there's going to be a mother and a father in the home, but I don't think it's all too realistic anymore because individuals are wanting to have, and I say individuals, women are wanting to have babies without men now. Not saying that I agree with it. I don't condemn it, nor do I condone it. I'd like to see both parents in the home. But in the absence of that, I'd like to see a loving family providing for a child. And when I was in the building as a teacher, administrator, principal, I saw very few fathers in the building. And it could have been for a various number of reasons. It could have been because of work. They're providing for the family. It could have been because they're not with the parent. But I just didn't see a lot of fathers. And that's just my take on it. So when you say you want your daughters to be married and have husbands that will be there, what if they get married and get divorced and have kids? I mean, ideally we want that, but I can't say that that's always going to be the case. I just think you're out of line for that. That's just my thought.
Well, I appreciate you telling me I'm out of line. That didn't change my perspective, and it could be wrong.
JR, I'm gonna do something that I rarely do. I'm gonna partially agree with Dr. McCord on this one. You know, because the reality is that there's some truth in that narrative. There's also some falsehoods as well. I think the bigger question is, how do we define the structure of a
That's the
family?
new question.
There it is.
That's the new question. Yeah.
We talking about all this other stuff. The structure in itself, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience, so I need people to understand. You know, I was raised by 6 women, my mom and my 5 aunts. My grandmother had 6.
That explains a lot about you too, Sean.
My dad wasn't there. So, you know, the reality is, are there some circumstances where men, irregardless of the situation, don't step up to the plate? There is, even when they can. But back to what you said, JR, the structure in itself doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in the home, living in the home, to be a part of a child's life.
Well, that
Some parents can live in a house and be just
as
or even
absent.
more
Just
absent
as absent.
than someone who's
That's
not
true.
there.
but that was what the question
So
was, right?
but
JR
I can
grew
see
up
it on
he
both
grew up in a
ends.
nuclear family.
But JR grew up. maybe Jay, I grew up
Two
with
parents, middle
the
class.
white picket fence and a mom and
so
daddy.
let
That ain't what I.
so
That ain't
Sean, let
what
me just Sean, I'm gonna let you finish, but let me just correct the record. So since Greg said that, my parents got a divorce when I was probably about 10 years old. Okay.
10 years old,
So-
man. That's
so-
half your
so I
life.
got-
Come on,
so-
man.
I come from a home where my parents were not together as well. But I'm gonna let you finish and then I'm gonna finish my point, Sean. Go ahead and finish your point. I want to correct that.
Yeah, my parents were never together. My daddy came to the hospital and signed the birth certificate. That's about the extent. But was my dad present, and did my dad play a role in my outcome? Yeah, because in many ways you can learn from a number of different perspectives. I learned what I didn't want to be as a dad from my dad, and I'm thankful for that lesson that he taught me. Even that wasn't the intention. But also understanding my mom had me when she was 20. My dad, they were kids. So the bottom line is I can't blame him when he's a child himself. And we have a great adult relationship. We didn't necessarily have the father-son relationship, but we managed to have a relationship in which we mutually understand our roles and our contributions to one another. So it can happen. But the brass tacks of it all, if we're going to be perfectly honest, there are many men in some situations that use the excuse that I don't want to deal with her. So
that's a
I
reality.
can't deal with
Hold on.
the child. But hold on. Let me finish. But the reality is there's also some women that make it difficult to say, I'm not going, because you ain't dealing with me, I'm not going to let you deal with the child. There are a lot of different dynamics that I think play into the structure and the access to being a father or a parent.
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do? The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind. And it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you. Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, a government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
Because for me, Brother Bishop, I was the one who was I gave my mama a Father's Day card on Father's Day. And I did it to my aunts and I did it to my grandma, because guess what? They helped me in the absence of someone from a physiological perspective that they called a man. They did the manly things and taught me many of the things to the best of their ability of what it is to be a man. A lot of it I had to figure out on my own, but I was blessed because I had a granddad, God rest his soul, who filled that gap. Yeah. So the dad and the absentee father can come in many shapes and forms. And I think we got to give some credibility to that whole narrative, because an absent individual doesn't mean it's an absent dad, because many people, and as a former principal, as a superintendent, we have to be fathers to kids. So they're there. The structure may not be the ideal structure that we say a father or a family is, but many of us have multiple children that they're not biological in nature to us. So again, I see it from both ends of the fences. There's some truth in the narrative that we got to own. As I'm not saying black men, men in general.
But the question,
because the narrative is that it's only black.
The question was about black men, and I was shocked. I mean, I'm blown away sitting on this call, sitting on this chat with y'all, and y'all are subscribing to this narrative about black fathers not being a part of their children's lives, even in the face of the data that tells you from the study. The study was from, I think it was 2013, from the CDC, The study combats that narrative that Black fathers are less engaged in their children's lives than any other ethnicity group. They are actually more engaged in their children's lives than any other.
I'd have to see that. I'd have to see
Look
that.
at the study, CDC study 2013 about Black fathers. Even Oprah Winfrey had to come on and say she had to change her perception and perspective about the amount of fathers participating in their children's lives.
So because Oprah said it, because Oprah said it. Okay, I'm just checking. I'm just making sure.
Oprah read the CDC report, Sean. She didn't say it. She read the report. I suggest that we spend time reading the report because we are actually regurgitating this negative narrative about the involvement of Black men or Black fathers in their children.
But is it a reality? But you want to make it seem like it's not a part of a reality. It's a
Black
reality.
fathers and being involved in children's life. The things that you explain happens in all ethnic groups. All ethnic groups, but we grew up under this idea that it was more pervasive in Black fathers than any other group. White fathers, Asian fathers, Hispanic fathers. We have bought into that. You all are giving personal anecdotal.
So man, because the article and Oprah said it. It's real. I mean, I'm speaking to you from my experience. I'm speaking to you from my experience.
But it's not about your experience. That is contextual.
Listen, I can only speak.
That's trauma speaking. That's trauma speaking. That's not data speaking. That's trauma speaking. There's a whole fraternity of men who are born out of the trauma bond.
It's about Black men. There's a whole bunch of Black men in the world. So there's a question about, are Black men not engaged? Now, was your father not there, or was my father not there? It's Black men in general who are fathers. Are they engaged in their children's lives? And I'm saying that the narrative that we have been told is a false narrative.
So Barrett, I think
I'm still gonna disagree.
This is something that contributes to the narrative. I think what contributes to the narrative is that there are, and the data supports this, there are more Black children born out of wedlock than other racial groups.
That is true.
That is true. And
that's
so,
true.
But Jake, I'm gonna say it's a social construct. It's a different social construct because more Black men are incarcerated, so therefore there is a inevitable absence of Black men. I get that. But when you talk about the whole, if you're gonna look at this from a broad umbrella perspective, you got to define a few things. You got to define structure. You got to define what involvement is. It has to be a similar definition of what involvement. Involvement is it day to day when I have to deal with my children and raise my son, or is it, do I come pick them up on a weekend? So what is the level of involvement that you're speaking about, man? And what level of involvement did the article refer to? Did I know my child's birthday? Did I show up on birthdays?
I can give you an anecdotal, since we give an anecdotal examples. Then we didn't take that one example and spread it across the whole group, which we know is wrong as educated men who have our terminal degrees, that you don't do that, right? But let me give you an anecdote.
Well, wait a minute.
So hold on. So my father was incarcerated the first 18 years, basically, of my life. But my father was involved in my life because my mother took me to the penitentiary to see my dad on Saturdays and Sundays. I spent holidays at the prison seeing my father on Saturdays and Sundays, Christmases, Easter, you name it, we were there. So my father was just much as involved in my life as from an instructional standpoint, from a discipline standpoint, from whatever it was for the limit of what he could do based on where he was. Now,
so was he as involved as you?
Hold on. Are we going to say that a father who's incarcerated is less involved in his child's life than a father who's deployed? So if a father's deployed, he's not physically in the home every single day.
Man, we talking about articles. We talking about articles. Hold on, Greg. We talking about articles. Can I find an article?
Just because you loud don't make you right. So I want to make sure we get that part out. You know, Sean said something a moment ago that makes sense, and that is, let's define the level of involvement. Now, I can't discount the article because I haven't read the article or the statistics that you speak of.
And I'm done, man. I'm done arguing that point with you.
But Greg, can we find out? Can we find another article that says? Can I find an article?
It's about enlightenment.
Greg, can I find an article to the contrary?
It's a study.
You talking about a study? Can I find a study to the contrary? Answer that question. Can I find an article that says the complete opposite?
From your perspective, black fathers are involved in their kids' lives.
No,
that ain't what I said. That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
I choose
what
not
I
to
asked
subscribe
is,
in there.
So wait a minute.
You brought up a date. You brought up
Yeah, brother, because we ain't hearing nothing right now. Come on, JR, get a picture.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this.
I can't believe this.
If I find an article, like Greg said, just
he all of a sudden want to be Suge Knight of the podcast.
Here's the thing. Hey, listen, JR. So here's what I'm gonna find out.
Five brothers in the mic. We need more mic.
And they're gonna get out.
So spirited debate. Obviously, there is some differing perspectives on whether this narrative is actually an accurate narrative. I tend to agree that I think it is overstated. And while there may be instances where black men are not involved, I think we are ignoring the multitude of black men who are involved. But I want to get back to something I said earlier that I think really causes people to conflate the issue. And the research does confirm, as Barron agreed with me on, that there are more black children born to unwed mothers than other racial groups. And I think that contributes to this whole mindset.
More than Hispanic?
Pardon me? Even Hispanic. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so, the research does confirm that. Yeah, there are more Hispanic children born in intact homes than there are black children. I think that's what contributes to this narrative, because black men aren't physically in the home to the same extent as other racial groups, that we conflate that they aren't as active as other racial groups. Greg, since you are one who disagrees with Barron's assertion that it's overstated, do you think that potentially could be the reason that there is this narrative that black men are not as involved?
Oh, I agree. I give some credence to that, and I'm not too far from believing that might be the case. Now, is it overstated? It could be, possibly. Now, Barron has cited an article. I do plan on going to check it out, and if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. But I do think that when you talk about the level of involvement, I think there's some quantifying features that have to be discussed before we can have some solid conversation on this or come to some conclusion. But I do plan on going to check it out, Barron. You mentioned your father was in prison. I grew up without my father. So we know 3 people on this podcast grew up without the father in the home. But was the father involved? My father wasn't involved. Your father was involved. It sounds like JR's father was involved up until the age of 10, maybe beyond. Aaron Bishop, his father was in the home. Bishop, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have Sean, right? And then you have Sean with his mother and 5 women, and that's why he gets sensitive sometimes, because but that's another conversation. My point is this: I think we need to define what is meant. You threw out something broad when you talked about black men and their involvement in the home. I think we need to define or corral what involvement really looks like.
Well, JR, let me add to this
research. As you know, with any research, that there are defining definitions for what involvement is. So
I plan to research
that research held everybody, every ethnic group, to the same definition. So therefore, based off a CDC study in 2013, it indicated that black fathers were more engaged or involved than any other ethnic group, which dispelled the perspective that black men were not involved in their children's
Now I'm gonna
lives,
check it out.
which was the
I'm
question.
gonna check it out. And
What I find kind of challenging, what I find kind of hard to accept, is that there's a study that actually highlights and put black men in a positive note, and we question the authenticity or the study.
I didn't question. I
But
said
we
I
accept
had seen.
the narrative. We accept the narrative that black men are
Sean,
not
Greg,
accepting.
I wouldn't explain that. Wait a minute. I gotta let Bishop has been waiting to chime in on this. So Bishop, go ahead and add your point.
So it goes back to what has been discussed. How do we define engagement? Because yes, my father was in my home, all the way until he left from this earth, right? He was always there physically. But what we got to define is, what does that mean? Because physically he was there, but man, financially, he was overworked, underpaid. So therefore I barely saw him. And when I did see him, he was in the pulpit preaching. So it was one fateful day that my dad, who's overworked, underpaid, he's in the grocery store, and another father chin-checked him. Another father called him out. He said, Reverend Bishop, Pastor Bishop, how come you never come to your kids' game? He's the star athlete of the baseball team. My father said,
Your
what?
brother?
Who? What, Greg?
You said star athlete, your brother?
Oh, absolutely not. It was Aaron Bishop. And as I'm the star athlete of the team, the guy tells my dad he can throw the ball from center field to home without a bounce. My daddy dropped everything in the grocery store and came to my first game, and I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
So those kind of things where you say, yeah, I had a father in the home. Yeah, but what does the engagement look like? Because I really was hurt by the fact that all the other fathers were showing up to the games in work clothes. Some of them were showing up with a beer can in their hand. No, my dad was absent. He was not there. And so when I look at the fraternity of men who say they don't have a father, and Sean said earlier that he gives a Father's Day card to his mother, he did. Yeah, man, I see a lot of that trauma, but also you got to see the trauma that I felt as well. When you look at rap music, half of the rappers out here are, putting their lyrics, I grew up without a father. And that sells. So it's a huge fraternity of men who buy into that. But again, to hurt Ricks, who's from Columbia, he's making sure he highlights the positive, that there are men. There are men who are actually involved, brothers. And I'm with Barron on this one. The data says it, yeah, that's one thing, but I'm talking about what I see with my own two eyes.
Okay.
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do? The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick your pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you. Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, a government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
So Greg, I'm gonna close. So I gotta tell folks, you can't fall for the Jedi mind trick. Baron Davis is a master of the Jedi mind trick.
Good at it.
No one said that one article that we dispelled that off of one article. So that's not the case. What I'm saying is that the realities of the circumstance is I can find articles to the contrary, and I could argue that point as well. And no one's saying that we're trying to cast Black fathers in a negative light, because here we are with 5 of us on a call who are being good fathers every single day. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the realities, whether we want to admit it or not, is that they exist And I'm not going to say that one article now says the highest percentage of Black fathers are engaged. I believe it's somewhere in the middle. But I'm not going to let Oprah Winfrey in one article say all fathers aren't engaged.
Oprah ain't been on.
Or
Oprah
all
ain't been
fathers
on
are
since
engaged.
2013.
You can make light of the fact that Oprah
You said
cited
2013. Come on, man.
She cited the research. It's not an article that said it. It was research by the CDC.
Okay. Baron, Maury Povich, he has paternity tests every show.
Find the counter research.
So it's that for me to say,
and accept that one. Find the counter
So you
research
think
that
we
says
can't-
that Black
so you
fathers
think
are less likely to be engaged, and then accept that one, and then that would fit the narrative that you want to.
we may
want
find
to share.
I'm
I'm gonna share the narrative that Black fathers are more engaged. That's what I'm gonna
Hold
share.
1 second. I want to flesh something out, and I want us to think about this. Now, I appreciate Aaron sharing that very personal story, as Baron has shared, and Greg and Sean has shared as well. But as I talk about the data that we acknowledge is accurate, that there are more Black children born to unwed mothers, and looking at through the lens of what Aaron just shared, most people would say Aaron's dad was very active in his life because Aaron's dad was in the home. And they might not know that Aaron's dad wasn't making any games, Aaron's dad wasn't going to report card pickup, Aaron's dad wasn't doing this or doing that because he was so busy working all the time. But people would automatically conclude that Aaron's dad is an active dad because he's in the home, even if they don't know anything about Aaron's dad. And even if they don't know anything about Aaron's dad, the fact that he's in the home, I think, would have them to conclude that he is active. And I think that this is another point that we're gonna have to grapple with in our community. Now, Greg, you say it's an unrealistic expectation that I said I want my daughters to be married before they have children. And
said for this generation.
For this generation.
I don't believe it's as realistic.
Tell me why that's
as previous generation.
Why is that an unrealistic expectation in our community?
Well, no. I said for this generation, I don't think that expectation is the same as previous generation. Well, we just talked about the highest percentage of unwed births. We can also cite the highest percent of divorced families. So we also can cite kids who waited until later in life to get married. You couple that with another fact, and that is kids are more than comfortable having babies without a partner. So, and then you mix in this LBGTQP thing, and I don't think it's the same realistic expectation. That's my view. Now I want to go back to Suge Knight before we run out of time. I do plan
I'm
on.
not disagreeing on that one. I was with you, man, but I like you lost. I got a daughter. I got a daughter too. My expectation is the same.
And that's my expectation, but that may not be her reality. So.
But the question was the expectation. No, that's what you said. That's not a realistic expectation for this generation.
I don't think it's a realistic. I don't think it's the same. I mentioned I have a daughter. I don't know if you heard me say that. I would prefer for her to be married with someone that's going to be with her as a life partner.
That's your expectation.
That's my expectation, but that's not her reality. When I have conversations with her, she doesn't see it the same way.
Why can't it be her reality? Why can't your expectation
I just said when I have conversations with my daughter, she does not express the same as I desire for her. Now that's about as real as you can get.
So she want to have a baby daddy. I'm just asking. That's what you just said. Your daughter wants to have a baby daddy.
You can call it what you want to.
I'm just asking.
If she want to,
you said her expectation is not the same as yours. That's what you just said.
She has not mentioned she wants to have a baby daddy. She has mentioned that she wouldn't mind having a child. There's no mention of a father. And I'll challenge you this, and I don't know your household. You have a daughter, and the other one has 2 daughters, and the other one has 3 daughters. Have that conversation. It might be the same, it might not. But in my house, it's a different conversation.
So Greg, you're right. We coming on we coming up on the end of the segment here, but I'll say this. I think as we talk about how we begin to improve our outcomes and conditions as a community, I think that is a very relevant conversation. I think the research also confirms that children who come from those kind of traditional family structures tend
They're
to
better.
and I'm not saying people can't do better outside of those structures, but I think that research will confirm that they graduate high schools at higher rates,
Right.
college
Right.
at higher rates, they're incarcerated
All
at
of that.
lower rates, all of those things. And if the research confirms that, and we understand all the positive around that, why can we not begin to make that shift as a community? And you're right, that is not the norm right now. That is not the norm. As I alluded to earlier, 7 out of 10 births in the Black community are to unwed mothers. It wasn't always that way. Okay, let's acknowledge it was not always that way. If we go back to when you were a child and I was a child, it most certainly wasn't that way. So the question is, as a community, why can't we begin to have the expectation that we go back to that expectation? Even if my own biological children don't live up to that, Greg.
So
Community.
So
why is it we don't begin?
So JR, I got a question. This is just really a question, not a. This is in my opinion, but if research tells us that African American children are not graduating at the same rates, if African American children seemingly are being incarcerated, and granted, there's social issues that contribute to these things, we understand that. However, if the article says that Black fathers are more engaged, then why aren't we seeing the outcomes of what the research is saying? That if both parents are involved, fathers involved, is higher graduation rate, less incarceration. So the article says one thing, but the outcomes of the data is showing something different. So there's a disconnect. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just making a statement that generally when there's this, A causes B. And you should get the outcomes from what the research is stating in my opinion. So there's just simply a disconnect in that regard. Where that is, if it's society's pull is a lot stronger than parental influence, I'm not saying that, I don't know. But that's the only thing that I could assume would be the case. If what Barron is saying in the research, they're more involved, but society outcomes show otherwise, where's that disconnect at? Is society's pull on children just that great? That's just a rhetorical question.
And I'm gonna just clarify what I said, Sean. I didn't say that the research indicated that children who have involved parents have better outcomes. I said children who come from traditional homes have better outcomes. Okay, so I don't want to conflate the two. All right, and so you can be an engaged parent. That's not the research I was speaking to. I was speaking to the research that says that children who come from traditionally intact homes have better outcomes.
So back to the statement of defining structure. What I said initially is what you're talking about. We're back to the structure.
I'm talking about a home
is traditional
home with mom and dad. Yeah.
Okay. I can accept.
So gentlemen, we are right up at the end of this segment. It was a exciting conversation. I appreciate you gentlemen sharing your personal stories. And that is just an example of the kinds of patients we are having during our session discussions. And so I thank you for joining us today around our whole topic of fatherhood in the Black community. As I told you before, it's unfiltered. We're not worried about hurting anybody's feelings here. We're just going to give it to you straight, no chaser, as we feel it. Thank you for joining us here. for the executive session. Until next time, God bless you. Have a great day.
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous, because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do? The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, a government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.